Hi, in today's video I'm going to go over Rudolf Steiner's cosmology. And it's going to be an overview because his cosmology is so vast and so dense that it would take years to fully exhaust. His cosmology is very interesting because he constantly relates the planetary evolutions back to man's evolution. Man's evolution in terms of his spiritual and soul bodies. And he constantly ties it back. He gives a bird's eye view of man's past, present, and future and provides a blueprint for our evolution. In this video, I'm going to break down the core concepts that he uses over and over again in his cosmology. Those will be the planetary evolutions, the spiritual hierarchies, and the bodies of man. All right, let's get into it. Planetary evolutions. In Steiner's cosmology, he says that Earth is a spiritual being that will one day evolve into another phase called the Jupiter phase. From this concept, you can deduce that Earth perhaps came from past evolutions. And this is in fact exactly what Steiner says. Earth, in fact, has 3 preceding evolutionary phases, and it will have 3 succeeding evolutionary phases. The 3 preceding evolutionary phases of Earth were ancient Saturn, ancient Sun, and ancient Moon. The 3 succeeding evolutionary phases of Earth will be called Jupiter, Venus, and Vulcan phase. The names used for these phases are related to the planets that we know today, but maybe not in the way that you think. For example, ancient Saturn phase. The Saturn phase is something that was the first phase. Today we know Saturn as the ringed planet that makes an ellipse around the sun. The ellipse that it makes around the sun was actually the circumference of the area of Earth in its Saturn phase. So during the Saturn phase of evolution, that whole area that Saturn makes an ellipse of was the encompassing area of ancient Saturn. And we call this ancient Saturn phase, but these are all phases of the Earth. So it went ancient Saturn phase, ancient Sun phase, ancient Moon phase, and this is Earth proper of Earth phase. And then there will be a Jupiter phase, a Venus phase, and a Vulcan phase of the Earth, right? And there are elements tied to each one of these. So for example, on Saturn, there was warmth, and warmth is all that existed. Rudolf Steiner goes to say that if you could fly over ancient Saturn phase, and if you can fly through it, which you could never do because the only thing that existed there was warmth. Air did not exist. Physicality did not exist, so you would not be there, you would not be able to fly. But if you did, what you would experience would be pockets of warmth, and that's it. Pockets of intensifying warmth here and over there. You would just experience little pockets of warmth. Then we get into the sun phase. The sun phase, what came out of the sun phase in terms of elements was gas in the form of smoke and light, which created the luminous body of the sun. And then the next phase, moon phase, was water. So what was water back then was more like a gel that was flowing. And then right now, currently, we are in our earth phase. And the element that comes out of the earth phase, well, it's basically mineral, hard, physical mass, earth. Earth like ground, like dirt. And so he goes on to say that each evolutionary period of Earth was also tied to a spiritual body of man. For example, on Saturn phase, as warmth was the only element that was created and existed there, out of these warmth pockets, spiritual beings started to form bodies. So Saturn was the physical, the seed of the physical bodies starting to form. On the sun is where man started to form his etheric body. On the moon, his astral body. And on earth, in our current incarnation, we are forming our ego. And there's this idea of recapitulation, which is central to the planetary evolutions. Each time a new phase, Saturn, Sun, Moon, Earth, each time a new phase goes through and completes itself, the next phase goes through the past one and basically recapitulates what happened before it while adding something new to it. So on Saturn, there was warmth only, right? And that was the first phase. In its next phase, Sun phase, what happens is whatever happened on Saturn happens again. It recapitulates. And because in this new phase, it's a Sun phase, something new gets added to the Sun phase. And in terms of elements, it was warmth. And then for Sun, it would be warmth, smoke, and light. And then in the moon phase, what happened on Saturn happens again, what happens on Sun happens again, and then something is added to it as part of the moon phase. And the same thing on and on and on. It recapitulates every single time with what happened previously and with something added to it. Spiritual hierarchies. So there are spiritual hierarchies above us and there are spiritual hierarchies below us. He talks about the evolution of Earth in terms of the hierarchies above us. And the way he explains it are there are 3 levels of hierarchies above us, and these 3 levels, in each level, are 3 types of spiritual beings. So in total, 9 above us. The hierarchy immediately above us consists of the 3 beings of the angel, the archangel, and the archai. The hierarchy above them are the spirits of form, the spirits of movement, and the spirits of wisdom. And the highest hierarchy, the 3rd hierarchy above us, are the thrones, cherubim, and the seraphim. And he constantly relates the evolutionary phases back to these spiritual beings and how these spiritual beings participated in each Earth evolution. For example, on ancient Saturn, the first phase, we know that the element of warmth came into being, which was also related to the physical body of man. These warmth bodies started to form, and that was the seed of what we now have as our physical body. So the task of the spiritual beings on ancient Saturn, as he explains, were that the thrones sacrificed warmth. They sacrificed themselves, gave of their complete being in the form of warmth. And basically these were what turned into the warmth bodies that were the seeds of our physical bodies. And he also goes to mention that archangels, for example, were met by cherubim on ancient Sun. So these archangels were sent out in the form of smoke, and they were reflected back in the form of light, which created this luminous body of the sun. And the beings that met the archangels were the cherubim, which is 2 levels of hierarchy above them. So you have this constant interaction between different levels of the hierarchies, and he just goes into intricate detail in every single planetary phase about which beings interacted with which beings and what they did together, what elements those formed, and what that has to do in relation to the spiritual bodies of man. Bodies of man. And this is the last section that I would say is essential to understanding Rudolf Steiner's cosmology. So our full being consists of the physical body, the etheric body, the astral body, and the I, or ego. He relates this to the planetary evolutions by explaining that our physical body is the most well-formed because that started to get formed on ancient Saturn, the first evolutionary phase of Earth. The second one was ancient Sun, which formed our etheric bodies, which is the second most well-formed body we have in us. And the third on ancient Moon was the astral body. And the fourth, right now, our incarnation on Earth, we gained the I, the ego. So the I, or the ego, is actually the least formed body we have of ours. In conclusion, we went through planetary evolutions, spiritual hierarchies, and the bodies of man. I think that these three things are crucial to understanding Rudolf Steiner's cosmology, and these are the three main things to really grasp and understand if you want to start to really dive into Rudolf Steiner's cosmology. Planetary evolutions, the main idea behind that is that there's a recapitulation. So with every new planetary phase, it repeats everything that happened in the past phases while adding something new to this phase. Spiritual hierarchies. There are spiritual beings that work above us and ones that are working below us. What always happens is that as the ones above us graduate or kind of up level, we do the same thing, and we become for the lower beings what the higher beings were for us. So someday we will be acting as the role of an angel to some beings lower than us. And the last thing is the bodies of man. And this is really core to his whole teaching in general, because he always relates all his teachings back into man's evolution, right? So the evolutionary phase of man as a physical body, as an etheric body, as an astral body, as an I or an ego, and so on and so forth. And so to wrap it up, these are the three main sections or concepts to really get and to understand in order to start to dive into Steiner's vast and amazing work.